Okay, so let's look at solving the problems on page 171 of our student journals, page 171. And problem number 1. Raphael drew 2 line segments. The combined length was 7 inches. One of the line segments was 2 3/8 inches long. How long was the other line segment? So the first thing they're asking us to do here is to determine the whole. And when they say determine the whole, they're not talking about the whole numbers. They're talking about what we've been talking about for the past several days. What is the whole when it comes to dealing with the fractions? Okay, and here we have fractions of eighths, so our whole would be 8 out of 8. 8/8 would be the whole. The next thing they ask us to do is to make a number model with an unknown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, the combined length was 7 inches, and one piece was 2 3/8. So if I have 2 3/8, and I add some number to it, okay, let's call that a length, L, it's going to give me a total of 7 inches. And so what I know from this number model is that to solve it, I'm going to have to subtract, okay, because I got 2 parts that make up a whole. I'm given the whole. So then I'm going to take the whole, subtract the part I know, and that will give me the missing part. Now, before we attack this problem with an algorithm, I just want to do it visually, okay? And so I've got a ruler down here, and I'm marking the 0, and I'm marking the 7, and my line segment is a total of 7 inches. So I have a 7-inch line segment here. And one segment I know was 2 3/8. Okay, so 1, 2, and this ruler is marked into 16ths, so every 2 ticks is going to be 1/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ticks would be 3/8. So there's 2 3/8. Okay, so I have this section being 2 3/8, and so I'm going to measure what I believe my answer should be. Okay, and so I'm lining this up to 0 over here, and I'm looking at the end of the line over here, and I get 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's a half, so that'd be 4/8, and it's right there at the 5/8 mark. Okay, not quite, probably because I'm a little short on my drawing. So, but I'm going to say 4 5/8. Okay, so now I want to attack that mathematically. So let's set up my problem. Go to my whole number, 7 minus 2 3/8. And one thing I talked about was setting things up kind of in a place value model. Here I have my whole numbers, even if they go into the tens, hundreds, or more. I have my whole numbers, and then I have my fractional side. Okay, and that's not going to go any farther because we're just dealing with eighths. So I've got nothing up here, and I want to try and take away 3/8. So I need something up here to take away from. And so what I can do is I can regroup this. Okay, so take my 7 and make it a 6, and I'm going to bring one whole over into this column. Okay, and one whole, remember we said the whole was 8/8. So when I take one whole out of this column and take it over here, what I have now here is 6 8/8, and we should know that 6 plus 8/8 is still 7. So we still have 7 up here. We've just decomposed it so that we can do the problem. Okay, so now it's a simple problem. 8/8 minus 3/8 is, I'm going to write, yeah, 5/8. Man, had to think there for a minute. And 6 minus 2 is 4. And so my final answer, 4 5/8, when I measured it, that's what I came up with, was 4 5/8. Okay, so remember, when you're bringing something over, okay, you had nothing here to subtract from, so bring over a fraction, bring over a whole. Okay, and that's how you would solve that one. Let's put that up a little bit so you can see the whole answer. So, one way to solve the problem, you can see it right here. And so for D, the answer with units, 4 and 5/8. And the units was inches. And that takes care of problem number 1. Okay, problem number 2. The wingspan of a dragonfly is about 6 7/10 centimeters. It is about 1 9/10 centimeters wider than the wingspan of the mayfly. What is the wingspan of the mayfly? Okay, so the wingspan of the dragon, well, before we do that, let's answer A. Let's fill in the hole. Okay, we've got tenths here. We've got tenths here, common denominator. So I know my hole is going to be 10 tenths. 10 tenths. Number model with unknown. Okay, so let me go back to the problem and read it again so that I can make sense of what's going on up here. So I've got my dragonfly wing, which is 6 7/10 centimeters, and it is about 1 9/10 centimeters wider than the wingspan of the mayfly. So if I took my wingspan of the dragonfly, 6 7/10, okay, and I subtract this because this is wider than the mayfly. So if I subtract that 1 9/10, then that will give me the wingspan of the mayfly. Make sense? I hope so. Okay, so I want to measure the wingspan of the dragonfly. I want to draw that first. And I want you to notice my ruler here that the 0 part has kind of worn off. Okay, the end here. And I'm not sure why, because the rest of the ruler seems fine. But that 0 is worn off. So I'm not going to start at the 0. I am going to start at the 5. Okay, and if I want to measure something that's going to be 6 7/10, then I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7/10. It's going to put me right about there. Whoops, moved the ruler a little bit. Let's make that line straight. Okay, so there's 6 7/10. And I'm going to take away, because that's the widest of the two, and what I know is that the mayfly has one that is 1 9/10 shorter. Okay, so that's almost 2. So I'm going to go over here, try and line this up pretty good. There's 6, and I'm going to go back 1, 2, but then I'm going to come forward one more, because it's only 1 9/10. Okay, so this little piece right here is 1 9/10. And if I look at this piece here, I'm going to say it's 1, even though I'm not starting at the 0, so now I make my 5 my 0, really. And I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, and it looks like it's 5, 6, 7, 8, like about 8/10. So I'm going to say 4 and 8/10. So those are the that is the answer that I'm looking to get close to. Okay, so now let's solve it numerically. And I've got 4 and 8. Whoops, that's my answer. I should go up here. I've got 6 and 7/10 minus 1 and 9/10. And once again, I have a larger number in the bottom than I do at the top. Okay, so I just can't take 7 from 9. I have to subtract 9 from 7. Okay, the bottom number from the top. Don't want to mess with negative answers. So I'm going to regroup. Okay, and when I bring it over, I have to go to the whole. How many am I bringing over? I'm bringing over 10/10. So I have 7/10. I bring over 10/10. And this 7 becomes a 17. Now I can subtract. 17 minus 9, 8/10. And this 6 became a 5 when I took 1 away. So 5 minus 1 is 4. And what do you know? 4 and 8/10. 4 and 8/10. Now I can go here and put my answer. 4 and 8/10, and my unit is centimeters. And there you go for that one, number 2. So now we're going to head to number 3. Number 3 is pretty simple because there's no regrouping involved. Okay, and theoretically or technically we really don't even have to rewrite the problem. Okay, because we can just subtract 3/5 minus 1/5, and that would give us 2/5 in the fraction column, and 6 minus 2 is 4, and that gives us 4 in the whole number column, and that's our answer. We're done. Let's go ahead and circle that so that we know that is the answer. Okay, let's take a look at number 4, and I wrote it out here because we have that regrouping issue again. Okay, and so on the bottom we have 90, on the top we have 45. I'm not going to be able to take 90 away from 45, so I'm going to have to get something in here to make this greater than 45, and what I do over here is go to the whole number place, and I take that 4 and I make it a 3. Okay, and by doing that I've taken 1 out, and that 1 is 100 over 100, and I'm just going to shift it over into this place value so that my 45 now becomes 145. Okay, so we understand we had 4 and 45 hundredths, and that is equal to 3 plus 1, the one that I regrouped, plus 45 hundredths. Okay, so 3 plus 1, 100 over 100, plus 45 hundredths, still gives me my same total up here. Okay, now I can subtract. So I'm going to do that. 145 minus 90. 5 minus nothing is 5. 14 minus 9 is 5. So that's going to give me 55 in my numerator. My denominator is going to stay the same. And now I have 3 minus 2, and that is simply 1. So my final answer is 1 and 55 hundredths. Again, with number 5, I've rewritten it already to put it in a tower so I can do things by place value. I have the regrouping issue again because I've got 1/4 up here and I've got 3/4 on the bottom. I'm not going to take 3/4 away from 1/4, so I'm going to regroup, make that a 5. Okay, took 1 out. That 1, so I had 6. Okay, now I've got 5, but I took that 1 out, and that whole, the whole is 4ths, so there's my 6 still, and I had 6 1/4, and I have 6 1/4. Okay, nothing changes, but I brought that 4/4 over here, so now that 1 becomes a 5. So I now have 5/4 over here, and now I can subtract. 5/4 minus 3/4 is 2/4, and 5 minus 2 is 3. So my final answer is 3 and 2/4. Once again, for number 6, I've already taken and towered it into place values. And here I have nothing again. If you remember how we did problem 1, maybe this will help you out to remember what you need to do here. So I have nothing, and I got to take away 4/6 from that. So I'm going to regroup, and I'm going to take 1 whole out and put it over here, okay, so that I still have the same value on this line. So instead of having 3, I have 2 and 6 over 6 because my whole is 6ths. Okay, so I had 3, now I've got 2 and 1, which is still 3. Okay, now I can subtract. 6/6 minus 4/6 is 2/6. 2 minus 1 is 1. And my final answer is 2 and 1/6. Could be simplified into 1 and 1/3, but I'm happy if we can come up with 1 and 2/6 for now. And that takes care of our 6 problems on this page.